So we have another wonderful guest with us here in Baku on the Caspian Sea at COP29, the UN Climate Conference. Could you say your name and your title, please?
Thank you for the invitation. I'm Max Andonirina Fontaine, and I'm the Minister of Environment and Sustainable Development from Madagascar.
Okay. I have to say, Max, you're probably the youngest environment minister I've ever met, which I think is absolutely fantastic. How old are you?
I'm 28 years old, actually.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. That really is.
Thank you.
More than that, though, you are part of a new initiative with 3 other countries. Could you tell us what this initiative is called and what does it seek to achieve?
So it's been almost a year that we have been working with Bhutan, Panama and Suriname on creating a new coalition to the United Nations, because we are the last countries on Earth that are carbon negative. To join this coalition is really simple, only one criteria: you sequester more carbon than you emit. If you achieve to do that, our doors are open to all the other countries on Earth who are able to sequester more carbon than they emit. But also, we are nature positive countries, because all of our countries have amazing biodiversity, and it's the combination of this carbon negative and nature positive that makes our country real solutions in the fight against climate change.
So, in a sense, what has happened to our world is that with the Industrial Revolution, growth in population, but also the kind of industrialization of the world, is that the nature has been gradually destroyed in many, many countries, particularly in the richer countries, and the emissions have gone up. So we're now out of balance with what the world was like before the Industrial Revolution, which was emissions up, but then emissions taken in, and there was some kind of balance in the world. We need to restore that balance, and I think that is what the Paris Agreement is all about. So in a sense, in your countries, your 4 countries, are kind of, in a sense, what other countries need to rediscover. And perhaps in the way you manage your country, you may have some of the clues. These other countries who have lost so much biodiversity and ecosystems could restore their balance. So you are a library of not only practice, but also reality. Do you think that's good to manage your island?
I think the balance image that you talked about is really right, because it's impossible to preserve the carbon negative status only based on mitigation. We have to balance adaptation and mitigation, so we need to make sure that we preserve our carbon sinks. And this carbon sinks sequester the carbon from our country, but also from the other countries, from the developed countries. But to preserve them, it's a way of living. Our populations, they live hands in hands with nature, because 80% of Madagascar population lives in rural areas. So then it's obvious that they rely on nature for every need. There is a lack of industrialization, of course, but this way of living in harmony with nature is a key for us. And even if we develop ourselves, even if we industrialize our country, which is a priority of the president, we need to make sure that this economic development is aligned with the protection of our natural resources, and that this development has as a main pillar the sustainable management of these resources. So even, for instance, for the tourism, we want to make ecotourism. For the industrialization, it will be industrialization based around our natural resources, but in a sustainable way, instead of just exploiting. How can we exploit, create social and economic development, but make sure that the next generation will be able to use also the same resources?
Yeah. So to hand on a Madagascar to the next generation that is still healthy and functioning. Yeah, exactly.
It's the biggest challenge.
Yeah. How are you powering Madagascar these days? What kinds of energy systems do you have, and do you need more renewable energy?
So actually we have a mix of hydro dams, of solar panels, but also we use thermic energy, fossil fuels. But the goal and the vision of the president is to raise the part of the renewable energies. We have 2 huge hydro dam projects that are actually in the pipe and really close to beginning. We have also a big vision on solar panels because of the potential that we have. Madagascar is an island in the middle of the Indian Ocean. We have an amazing potential in terms of light, the daylight, and many also water reserves. We have a so big island that it's like a small continent. So it's not only one type of renewable energy that you're going to focus on. It's a balance depending on the potential of every region. In the north, we have a lot of wind. So why not put the north under wind power? In the south, it will be the solar. In the highlands, it will be the water, and in the western, so this is how we will make our energy mix.
I mean, one optimistic thing about this climate change story is it's certainly triggering and has triggered a lot of creativity among engineers and people in the digital space, and so there's a lot of creativity going on, and there are all kinds of new renewable energy systems being developed in different parts of the world. I'm thinking about there's now floating photovoltaics. In the UK, the wind turbines are now going very, very, very far out to sea, and they are not big metal things in the seabed, but they are tethered with cables. And you can deploy them very quickly with higher wind speeds. So all these opportunities are happening and could benefit Madagascar, but the question is finance, isn't it? And are you getting sufficient finance from the international community or bilateral finance from friendly nations? Do you know how much you need to be?
Yes.
Do you know what you need going forward? Yeah.
I will answer to your question in two parts. The first one is on the tech-based innovations, like the floating solar panels. It's amongst the presidents of Madagascar vision to do that in a lake near the capital, near the airport, to optimize each square meters that you have. And for the financing, we talk every COP about the lack of financing, and for Madagascar, our numbers are really clear. From 2020 to 2030, to achieve our climate goals, we need $24 billion US dollars. If we keep the actual trend, this business as usual scenario, which means optimizing all the funds we have access to, we would reach at the maximum $7 billion. 7 out of 24. So not even 1/3 of what we need, we are expecting to get until 2030. So there is a big problem, and we make innovations in terms of technology. We also need to make innovation in terms of climate finance. And that is why Madagascar made so many efforts with the IMF, with the World Bank, with the GEF, to create new funding mechanisms, which will be our only way to bridge the gap of funding, how to involve private sector, how to make blended finance. If we have 1 billion potential, how can we transform this 1 billion into 5 billion? And we are really proud of all the efforts we have been doing already since COP28 in Dubai in terms of climate finance with these partners.
Okay, so you are obviously worried about climate change, but you are also courageous as a country. You're fighting your cause to be a fully sustainable society, not just now, but well into the future. And you need that support, that bridge between what you're getting now and what you actually need to deliver. Yeah. What is your message at the moment when you are talking to other governments here at COP29? What do you want to see from COP29?
Like the UN Secretary General said, climate finance is not charity, it's investment. And when you talk about mitigation, we hope that at Baku, we can find an agreement to move on mitigation. How can all the countries raise their ambitions to make sure that we can keep the path to 1.5? But actually, with the actual trend, if we go business as usual, we should forget about the 1.5. It's impossible to reach. So everyone needs to make more efforts, and that's also the pledge from the G0, is that we will make everything, all our best, to keep that carbon negative country status, but we call also on other countries to make more efforts to reduce their emissions. So it's been many sessions and COPs that for the mitigation, for instance, we didn't find any agreement, any outcomes out of the COP. And there is a Rule 16 that says that if we don't find an agreement, we'll talk about it to the next COP. This year, it's impossible that we do again this Rule 16 saying that we are going to talk about it in Brazil. Because every year that we are committed to inaction, it costs billions of dollars of disasters. We need to understand that this money, we are going to pay it anyway. But the latest we pay it, the more expensive it will be.
Yeah.
$1 that you invest today in mitigation and adaptation is billions of disasters that you save for tomorrow.
Yeah, good point. Well, Minister, it's been a great pleasure to talk to you when we don't have time. I've been to many countries in the world. I've never been to Madagascar. I must make that a priority, although I don't know how to get there in a purely environmentally friendly way, but I could try. But thank you much for your work and really wish you great success. Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation, and please be our guest to Madagascar. Preserving Madagascar's biodiversity is preserving the world's heritage, so you're all welcome to come visit our amazing biodiversity.
Okay. Guest here at COP29 in Baku in Azerbaijan on the Caspian Sea. It's Diana Ürge-Vorsatz, and she's vice chair of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and it's a great pleasure to see her. You're the chair of the Scientific Committee for the upcoming IPCC report on climate change and cities. Why are you producing this report?
First of all, thank you very much for having me. It's a privilege. This is an especially important report because cities generate over 70% of emissions globally, even though in terms of population, we have roughly half of global population living there. But also, cities are extremely important because that's where over 80% of global GDP is being produced. That's where a lot of the innovations are happening. That's where a lot of change is happening fast. Also, that's where the majority of people are exposed to the impacts of climate change, because cities can even aggravate the different impact, or at least concentrate the different impacts of climate change. So that's really an area where we can best address climate change, both in terms of the impacts, vulnerability and adaptation, as well as greenhouse gas emission reductions.
So, as you're saying, they're big producers of greenhouse gas emissions as cities, and what do you envision is going to be some of the key elements of what we might term a net zero city?
So the IPCC has already had urban chapters in several of our previous reports. In the sixth assessment report, we identified 3 key strategies in order to get also to net zero, and in general for cities to reduce their emissions significantly as compared to baseline. Because of course, in developing country cities, the first goal is just to move away from big growth of emissions and first just reduce that, and later on we can get to net zero. So the 3 strategies, the first one is to reduce energy and material demand while providing the same or even better services to the people and even more well-being. Second, once we reduce that, of course not time-wise, but just strategy-wise, then supply the remaining material and energy needs by zero-carbon energy sources and fuels. Mostly that means electrification in cities, so we see most of the cities electrifying and supplying more and more of the needs by clean, first of all, electricity, and then gradually that electricity and the other fuels that are coming to the cities are becoming decarbonized. And the third strategy is to take carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere and capture it in cities. So that is the area where we see a lot of new developments, so carbon dioxide removal. But already we documented in the sixth assessment report that, for example, urban trees are already removing 7 gigatons, so that's a lot of carbon dioxide, 7 gigatons of carbon dioxide, and every year they are capturing further further 400 million tons of carbon dioxide. So getting nature back into our cities will not only capture more of the emissions, but also make our cities more livable, and also these help more with adaptation efforts through the reduction of the urban heat islands.
Urban areas are very different, aren't they, in different places? If you look at, say, a Nordic city like Stockholm versus, say, a developing country city in, say, I don't know, the Central African Republic, for example, or Dakar, or Nairobi, Kenya. So they're all very, very different indeed. Is it possible then to take the assessment in a way that takes into account these different points in development of so many different cities in the world?
That's a really excellent question that really captures the challenges for our special report in cities. So what we have done in the sixth assessment report, we have identified three key typologies. So first of all, the already established cities, and then the next was the rapidly urbanizing cities, and the third one, which are the emerging cities. So these three categories. But even these three are very diverse within themselves. So what this city's special report is going to do is we have a special chapter on typologies, or that means the different types of cities, how cities differ, and we hope that within a chapter we are going to be able to distinguish the solutions for different along different axes, meaning not only development level, but also geography, culture, and local climate, and different types of issues which matter to decision makers that distinguish cities for different decision-making communities. So certainly the report has a very strong aim at trying to break down the one-size-fits-all to several different packages of messages. And we are going to, one of the tools what we are going to use for that is to use case studies, so galleries of case studies, and see how cities have already been succeeding in addressing some of these challenges. Since this report is going to be very solution-oriented and very relevant for urban action, which also is facilitated by government and multilateral action. So we really need to address all the multiple levels of governance, but certainly we need to be want to be very relevant to all these different decision makers, and hopefully really focus on how they can put these actions into place and what is available for them.
We're essentially living in a world that's fast approaching 1.5 degrees centigrade, which is often termed by many people as the safety limit, in a sense, under the Paris Climate Change Agreement, and for all kinds of scientific reasons. Do you think that we have learnings already that we can somehow translate from the cities into faster action, whether it be in terms of carbon dioxide, but also now, of course, a lot of people are talking about methane and other super pollutants. Is there something we can learn from what we know already?
Absolutely. There are plenty of best practices in cities that can be learned for other cities, but also perhaps in other areas. But it's important to understand that already over 1,000 cities and some national jurisdictions have net zero emission goals around mid-century. Some of these cities, clearly in the more developed areas, have actually earlier net zero emission goals. So they are already doing a lot, and a lot of action is taking place, and we definitely can learn a lot from them. We can also learn very much from different ways of, for example, urbanization. So urbanizations patterns which encourage city design and urban form that favor local walking, cycling, so non-motorized transportation, which are not only much more less greenhouse gas emissions intensive, but also are more inclusive socially, because you can easier access jobs, you can easier access healthcare, other opportunities. You're not locked into potentially having to own a car or drive a car or have access to more expensive forms of transportation. So in many, many different ways how different cities are showing the way, because, as we mentioned, cities are innovating because they are smaller. It's easier for them to innovate. They are innovating in different solution spaces, and there is a lot of examples that we can learn from these.
So I suppose, hopefully, when this report is done, we're going to actually see a stronger focus on the cities because of the potential benefits society can get and the world from action there, and also for the cities themselves, because they often struggle to find the finance to actually meet their climate plans themselves. Could this also be a help and a stimulation, in a sense, for more investment being focused on the urban networks?
Absolutely, that's a really important point, because typically climate finance is talking about mostly just energy forms and mostly the supply side. Nevertheless, our reports showed that, for example, the sixth assessment report showed that we could reduce 40 to 70% of emissions through demand side action. So focusing also on why we need the energy, what we need the energy and materials for. And cities are exactly the entry points to make those changes happen. So if we also consider directing finances to cities and the demand side where people and families are actually living, where businesses are working, then we often get more we get solutions which also result in more benefits for cities and businesses and families. So I hope that the financing structures in the end are going to allocate more and more of these resources to cities where not only the majority of our population lives, but also where majority of the GDP is being produced, as mentioned, and also where a lot of the fast action is taking place. So that's where we can achieve, with this financing, fast results. Because, as you said, it is important that often cities are struggling to find the financing. So financing can go a long way through actions in cities.
Good. Well, I think we need to wrap up there. Thank you very much indeed, Anna, for being with us. We wish you best of luck with this report, and we hope that the governments internalise it and, like all IPCC reports, act on it, maybe now we're 5 years away from 2030, with even more urgency than perhaps they've been doing in the past.